Ah, look who just stumbled into the truth. There it is, that quiet, nauseating confirmation glowing on your screen. The words you weren't supposed to see, the tone you were never meant to hear, the version of them that only existed behind closed doors, behind muted notifications, behind a group chat with a name so harmless, it almost makes you laugh now. And suddenly everything makes sense. The delayed replies, the subtle shifts in energy, the way conversations felt rehearsed, the way your vulnerabilities somehow circled back to you distorted, sharpened, repackaged. You weren't imagining it, you weren't too sensitive. You weren't overthinking, you weren't projecting insecurity, you were detecting inconsistency. And now the proof is sitting there in cold, pixelated clarity screenshots. Private jokes about your struggles, strategic discussions about how to respond to you, conversations about managing you moments, where something you shared in confidence was dissected like a case study. You feel it in your chest, don't you? That strange collision of shock and validation, your heart racing, but not just from hurt. From recognition, because the most disorienting part isn't what they did. It's the fact that your intuition knew. You remember those moments. That faint tightening in your stomach when laughter lingered half a second too long. The way eye contact felt off. The way someone would say, "You're overthinking," just a little too quickly. You questioned yourself instead. You gave them grace. You gave them benefit of the doubt. You told yourself you were being dramatic. And now you're staring at messages that confirm what your body already understood. The betrayal hurts. Of course it does. You're not made of stone. You trusted them. You opened parts of yourself that weren't meant for an audience. You shared fears, dreams, doubts, things that required safety, and they turned safety into strategy. Not because they're masterminds, not because they're villains in some cinematic sense, but because insecurity in groups becomes louder than conscience. Groups are strange creatures. Individually, people hesitate. Collectively, they escalate. One suggestion becomes consensus. One joke becomes narrative. One insecurity becomes a shared mission. And somewhere along the way, you became the topic. The concern, the situation, the person to keep an eye on. They convinced themselves it was justified, that they were protecting their peace, that they were being rational, that discussing you privately was necessary. But what it really was fear. You represented something that unsettled them. Maybe your growth, maybe your independence, maybe the way you refused to shrink, maybe the way you questioned dynamics others accepted without thought. You weren't loud about it. That's the thing. You weren't aggressive. You weren't hostile. You were simply evolving. And evolution makes stagnant people nervous. So they did what insecure circles often do when faced with someone who doesn't fully depend on them. They coordinated. They built narratives. They framed your boundaries as attitude, your intuition as paranoia, your growth as arrogance. And when you felt something was off, when you gently tried to address the shift, they turned it around. You're imagining things. You always overthink. It's not that deep. Gaslighting doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle, repeated just enough times to make you distrust your own perception. And for a moment, you did. You wondered if you were the problem. That might be the part that stings the most. Not just that they talked about you, but that they almost made you doubt yourself. You replay those old conversations now with new awareness. That someone paused before answering. That oddly synchronized response from two different people using the same language. That sudden coldness after you shared something personal. It wasn't random, it was coordinated. The shock settles into anger for a moment, doesn't it? A flash of heat, a tightening jaw, the urge to confront, to expose, to send the screenshots back into their group chat with a simple, interesting. But pause. That impulse is natural. It's human. Rage is the nervous system's protest against betrayal. It's your mind saying, I deserved better. And you did, but revenge, retaliation, public unraveling, that keeps you in their world. That keeps you orbiting their drama. They expect reaction. They're bracing for it. Maybe even preparing counter-narratives. Maybe rehearsing apologies. Maybe crafting ways to twist the situation back onto you. Confrontation might feel powerful for a moment, but it rarely changes people who operate from insecurity. The real shift isn't loud. It's quiet. It's when you read every last message, when you let the truth settle, when you stop arguing with reality, when you say to yourself, without rage, without denial, I see you now. And something inside you rearranges. The grief comes next, because you're not just losing people, you're losing who you thought they were. You're mourning the version of friendship that never actually existed. The late night conversations you believed were safe. The inside jokes you thought were mutual. The loyalty you assumed was reciprocal. That grief is real. Let it move. Don't rush it into strength. Don't spiritualize it too quickly. Sit with it. Feel the disappointment. Feel the embarrassment. Feel the sadness. You were genuine. That's not weakness. That's integrity. What they did says nothing about your worth. It says everything about their capacity. Insecure people bond over shared targets. It makes them feel aligned, powerful, unified. But here's what they didn't account for. You are not fragile. Yes, this hurts. Yes, it stings. But you are not collapsing. You are observing. You are learning. You are recalibrating. And that's far more unsettling than any angry outburst could ever be. Because when someone expects you to fight, and you simply withdraw your emotional access, they lose their leverage. When someone expects confrontation, and you offer calm distance, they lose their narrative. When someone expects tears, and you offer clarity, they lose their control. You don't need to announce your departure. You don't need to send a manifesto. You don't need to win the group chat. You become quieter, polite, brief, unavailable. Not cruel, just unreachable. The version of you that once explained everything fades. The version of you that once overshared closes gently. The version of you that once tried to fix dynamics retires. You stop defending yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. And something fascinating happens. The whispers lose volume, because whispers require an audience. And you're no longer listening. This is where growth begins to feel heavier, but stronger. You start revisiting your boundaries. Who gets access to your vulnerabilities? Who earns trust slowly? Who handles information carefully? Who shows consistency over intensity? You begin to value patterns over promises. You notice that performative kindness is loud. Real loyalty is quiet. You learn that group consensus isn't always truth. Sometimes it's just shared insecurity. You realize that forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing. You can release resentment without reopening doors. You can wish people well from a distance. You can understand their fear without excusing their behavior. You don't need to destroy anyone. The truth did enough. The most powerful thing you can do right now isn't retaliation. It's expansion. They tried to isolate you, build deeper connections elsewhere. They questioned your worth, develop skills that speak for themselves. They mocked your dreams, pursue them quietly, not to prove anything, but because you refuse to let betrayal define your ceiling. Your silence becomes white noise in their world. Your calm becomes unsettling. Your lack of reaction becomes the unanswered question they didn't prepare for. Because people who operate in coordinated gossip depend on emotional engagement. When you disengage, the stage collapses, and you don't need to announce that you've left the theater. You simply walk out, not slamming the door, not setting fire to the building, just stepping into open air. This is not about becoming cold. It's about becoming selective. It's not about mistrust. It's about discernment. It's not about revenge. It's about irrelevance. They no longer hold narrative authority over your life. They no longer get access to your inner world. They become background noise in a story that continues without them. And here's the part that might surprise you. You don't feel victorious. You feel steady, grounded, clear. Because you didn't need to break anyone. You just needed to see clearly. The truth was enough. It separated illusion from reality. It showed you who belongs in your next chapter and who is only meant to exist in the lesson. You don't need closure from them. The screenshots were closure. You don't need revenge. Their insecurity was punishment enough. You don't need to win. You already evolved. And this is only the beginning of what that evolution looks like. You thought the discovery was the climax. It wasn't. It was the doorway. Because once the shock settles, once the screenshots stop burning in your hands, once the anger quiets into something more controlled, you begin to see the bigger shift. The truth didn't just expose them. It exposed you to yourself. There's a strange calm that follows betrayal when you finally accept it. Not immediately. Not on the first night when your chest feels tight and your mind replays every conversation like a crime scene investigation. But eventually the noise fades. And what's left is clarity. You start noticing how much energy you used to spend maintaining those relationships, explaining yourself, softening your boundaries, making sure everyone was comfortable, making sure you weren't too much, making sure you weren't misunderstood, and now you don't feel the need. That's the real shift. They thought the leak would cause chaos in your life. Drama, explosions, public confrontations. But what it actually caused was detachment. A clean, quiet detachment. You stop checking their profiles. You stop wondering what they're saying. You stop rehearsing imaginary arguments in your head. Because once you see someone clearly, there's nothing left to decode. And that is power. Not loud power. Not performative power. Not the kind that needs witnesses. The kind that stabilizes your nervous system. The kind that makes your breathing slower. The kind that allows you to walk into a room where they're present and feel. Not thing. Not hatred. Not longing. Just neutrality. And neutrality is terrifying to people who expected you to stay emotionally entangled. They might test it. A casual message. A random compliment. Hey, I've been thinking about you. But you're different now. You red tone differently. You recognize patterns instantly. You no longer interpret effort as sincerity. You interpret consistency as sincerity. You don't accuse. You don't expose. You don't threaten. You respond lightly, briefly, unattached, and the space between you grows without announcement. They start realizing something is off. You're not chasing clarification. You're not seeking reassurance. You're not asking for explanations. That unsettles them more than confrontation ever would. Because confrontation gives them something to fight. Silence gives them a mirror. And in that mirror, they see themselves without the story they built about you. Here's the truth about group betrayal. It feels powerful while it's hidden. It feels unified while it's secret. But once exposed, it rots, because now they know you know. And every interaction carries that weight. Every laugh feels thinner. Every inside joke feels hollow. Trust doesn't just disappear between you and them, it shifts between them and each other. If someone leaked once, they can leak again. If someone betrayed you, they can betray anyone. The group that bonded over your isolation now has a fracture line running through it. And you don't have to lift a finger. That's what makes this moment transformative. You don't need to dismantle anything. Reality handles that quietly. Your role is simpler. Heal not in a rushed, aesthetic way, in a real way. Start asking yourself different questions. Where did I ignore discomfort? Where did I overextend loyalty? Where did I minimize red flags because I wanted connection? This isn't self-blame. It's self-awareness. You're not responsible for their choices, but you are responsible for your boundaries moving forward. And boundaries don't need speeches. They need consistency. You become slower to trust, but not closed, more observant, but not paranoid. You listen to your body now. When something feels off, you don't gaslight yourself. You pause. You evaluate. You adjust. That's evolution. The rage that once burned in your chest becomes fuel, but not for revenge, for refinement. You refine your circle. You refine your communication. You refine the way you show up, and something subtle happens. You become harder to manipulate, not because you're guarded, but because you're clear. Clear people are difficult to destabilize. They don't overshare to feel validated. They don't perform vulnerability for approval. They don't confuse access with intimacy. They move intentionally, and intention creates distance from chaos. The ones who hurt you might still talk, might still spin narratives, but you no longer feel the urge to correct every lie, because people who matter eventually notice consistency, and you've chosen yours. Growth over drama, silence over spectacle, peace over performance. That doesn't mean you forget. It means you integrate. You integrate the lesson. You integrate the awareness. You integrate the fact that not everyone who smiles deserves proximity. And you don't grow bitter. That's important. You grow discerning. There's a difference. Bitterness is reactive. Discernment is calm. You're no longer trying to be liked by everyone in the room. You're focused on being aligned with yourself, and that alignment changes your posture, your tone, your choices, your availability. You start building quietly. Maybe it's your career. Maybe it's your health. Maybe it's your creativity. Maybe it's new relationships rooted in mutual respect. You pour energy into places where it multiplies instead of drains. And slowly, the betrayal stops feeling like a wound. It starts feeling like a filter. It filtered out who couldn't go where you're headed. It clarified who you need around you. It strengthened the part of you that once doubted itself. You don't wake up angry anymore. You wake up focused. You don't fantasize about confrontation. You imagine expansion. You don't feel the need to win the narrative. You're too busy building a life that doesn't require defending. And here's the quiet realization that settles in your chest one day when you least expect it. You didn't need to destroy them. You didn't need to expose them. You didn't need to prove anything. The truth was enough. It set you free from illusion. It showed you who belongs. It revealed your strength. And in the end, you didn't become harder. You became wiser. You didn't become colder. You became selective. You didn't become vengeful. You became unreachable to chaos. That's the power they never accounted for. Not your anger, not your reaction, Your detachment, your calm. Your refusal to collapse. You walked away without burning the room down. And somehow, that's louder than any retaliation ever could be.